In this session, we're going to look at how functions work. Functions allow us to group blocks of code together. We can declare a function by using the term def, which is short for define. Then we can give the function a name. There are different naming conventions you can use. I'm going to be using pothole case, and I'm going to call the first function get numbers, bracket, bracket, and a colon. What I'd like to create is a very simple addition and subtraction calculator. So the very first part of the program is going to be called get numbers. In this function, I want to be able to get the numbers from the user. So to do this, I'm going to go number 1 is equal to input, enter number 1, enter the first number. And then I'm going to do a simple addition to begin with. So what I want to do is get number 2 and ask them for the second number. So if I go to run my program now, you'll notice there's no output. And that's because this function hasn't been called yet. Now to call a function, we need to call it at the bottom of our program. So this is where our main program will be. And to call get numbers, all we've got to do is go get numbers, bracket, bracket. The way in which the program works, it likes to have its functions defined first. So when the functions are defined, it then knows that they exist. So when you go get numbers, it knows what to go to. So let's run the program now. You'll notice it's got enter first number. I can put in 1, and then enter second number, I can put 2. At the moment they're coming as input. I want to ensure that they are integers, so I'm just going to put int. Therefore it takes the text input, ensures it's an integer, and stores that in number 1. Now when working with functions, you may have to use what are called global variables. Now global variables are variables that functions can see. If I declare a variable inside of a function down here, like number 1, no one else can see this at the moment because it's inside this container. So for other functions or other bits of code on the main timeline in the main program, if they need to see number 1, we need to declare it as a global. To do this, we just need to go number 1, and what I like to do is let it equal something, so I'm just going to let it equal 0, and also number 2 is equal to 0, and then inside the function we need to use something like global and then number 1. So this way you can see it all light up in pink that number 1 is this one, which is actually a copy of this one. Then we can input the number. We also need number 2. So I've added that to the list. I've also separated it by the comma. So the comma is very important for global variables, and that gives you your list as you go along. So outside the main program, we should now be able to go print number 1 and print number 2. Because without those global variables, you will not be able to see the numbers. So when we run our program now, enter 1, enter 2, and we get 1 and 2. Where if they're not declared as a global, if I remove this by making it a comment and run the program again, enter in 1 and 2, I get 0 and 0. Because these print statements here can't see the change that occurred inside the function. So that's why we've got to use global. Now once we've done that, we can then add the numbers and subtract the numbers. So let's get the numbers, and now let's go add numbers. So I've made a function name, but I actually haven't declared the function yet. And that's why I'm getting the error line underneath that. So up in my program, I can then come in and go def and define that function. Remember to put the colon. Now the indenting is important. All these lines of code that are indented up here belong to get numbers. The lines of code that are going to be in here belong to add numbers. Now to add the numbers, I need to bring in the number 1, number 2, the ones that changed before. So I'm going to borrow this line of code right here and paste it here. So those numbers have now been brought in. So after this function get number has changed them, I'm now bringing them into add numbers. Now I'm going to create another variable called answer. So answer is equal to number 1 plus number 2. And if I want to, I can print bracket answer. So let's run the program now. Enter the first number, 2. Second number, 2. You'll notice the answer is 4. Now the reason why it's saying 4 first is because it goes get number, so it does this first. Then in the main program goes add number, so it comes up and does add number, where it gets the 2 numbers, works out the answer, prints out the answer, and then it prints out number 1, number 2. Once again, if I go print answer, you notice that it's coming up with a red line underneath it. It's an unresolved reference because the computer doesn't know what answer is. So if I want to use it as a global, I should declare it, and I'm also priming it with 0, and then I can add this to my list. And you notice that they all light up now knowing that they're there. So when I run the program now, I can go 2 plus 1. You can see this print here is 3. Then it finishes the add number, prints out the first number, which is a 2, then prints out the second number, which was a 1, and then prints out the answer at the end. So now that I want to subtract the numbers, I can delete these lines of code here, subtract numbers, bracket, bracket. So you can see that I'm using pothole case, all lowercase and separated by underscores. I'm just going to highlight that and once again define a new function called subtract numbers. Subtract numbers is basically the same as add numbers, so I'm just going to copy that down. And the only difference is our calculation, which is subtract. So number 1, take number 2 and print out the answer. So let's run that program. Enter number 1. So 5, enter number 2, 3. When they're added together, you get 8, and 5 take 3 is 2. We might want to concatenate the output so it's a little bit better. To do that, we might go number 1, and we need to output this, so it needs to be a string. So I'm just going to go str. So turn number 1 into a string. Then I'll want to concatenate this by adding a space and a plus sign to number 2. So once again, I need to str bracket number 2. And then I want to add an equal sign. And then I want to add the answer. Make sure that you put the concatenator back in here. And that removes any red lines. So this concatenated string now has the number turned back to a char, so we can put the plus character in, which might be a little bit confusing, is the concatenator. So this number as a string plus this characters, which is the plus sign, plus this number as a string, plus the equal sign, plus the answer as a string. So it all comes out as text. So when I run the program now, I can go 3 and 5. 3 plus 5 equals 8. And if I did the same thing in here, I could have 3 minus 5 equals minus 2. I'll leave it up to you to finish the concatenation here. So you can see how we can actually modulate code and group it together so it has easy flow. So I hope you found this tutorial useful. Give it a like, subscribe to my channel. Also have a look around for other useful Python snippets.